Hey, Off-Season After Dark fans. Glad to welcome you here for episode 21. And we have our second episode where we go back to the Sun Belt Conference, but stay in the state of Louisiana. So we fortunate enough today to have Thibs with us here from the Warhawk Report to talk about Louisiana Monroe and how their season's going, success they've had under Bryam Vincent, and anything you can think of about that conference and team. So Thibs, glad to have you here. Why don't you tell some of the people what got you into ULM, what got you into this space covering the team, and where they can find you?
Yeah, I mean, I grew up on Old Southland Conference football, so I always knew that somewhere in the Old Southland was going to be home for me whenever I decided to make a 4-year commitment to college. Played some high school basketball, and that led me to having opportunities to go back to some Louisiana schools. Of course, in the true 17, 18-year-old self, you're always much better in your head than you really are, and you blow off the guaranteed offers. But at the time, I was going to go into nursing school, nursing, one of the top degrees you can get at ULM. So Sign me up. I'm there, coach. Put me in. That didn't last long. So bounced around, finally graduated several years later after meeting my wife, having some kids, but found around 1999, the crazy internet was still kind of hanging around and it was really starting to stick. And NLU at the time did not have a very good web presence. So I started jumping in and trying my best to work alongside to kind of give a fan perspective of what was going on with the athletic programs. Fast forward, I was then approached by Rivals in 2005 when they were making a big push to get into the G6 market. And
Charlie Weatherby years, is that about the time, right? Charlie Weatherby around that time?
That was the Charlie Weatherby era. Oh. And the lone Sun Belt Conference title that is a travesty. And I know people are like, you have hardware. Yeah, but you kind of back into it and you got to share it 3 different ways. It doesn't have the same meaning. Lo and behold, though, started Warhawk Report right around that time and have just grown it from then to continue covering recruiting, recovering the athletics. Spun off last year and started Believe in the Warhawks on the Believe Network, which was a spinoff from a good old COVID project there of Fun Belt podcast covering the Sun Belt Conference. All that to say, I talk a lot about ULM, and people didn't like it on the Fun Belt podcast, so I started my own and talk about ULM.
I'm shocked they didn't like it. You feel like it would be good to get info on any of the teams in the conference, but
for sure,
yeah. But no, glad to have you here. That's a good story. So let's dive in a little bit. ULM, I mean, they are doing what 3-5, maybe. Some people might look at that and say not great, but I've been a big Bryam Vincent fan in the 2 years they've had him there. The last year started hot, didn't finish the season as great, down the stretch there, but his team seemed to have a clear identity of we are going to run the ball, we are going to play fundamental, and they've definitely raised the bar from when he took over. Wouldn't you say so?
No doubt. And last year, jumping out to that 5-1 start, you saw a mention that ULM was the G6 representative in the playoff. I mean, it was kind of craziness and just unexpected success. But then if you've ever played darts, right, and you try to line up that dart to hit the bullseye and you're just aiming so hard that you can't hit it instead of just doing what's natural and really throwing the dart. That's really what happened in that second half of the season after that 5-1 start. They started trying to force it, saying, hey, we have to run the ball. We have to do this. We have to do that so that we can win and go to a bowl game. Well, when they started forcing it, it didn't come naturally like it had for those first 5 wins. And so they were kind of behind the 8 ball the whole way. The defense changed, the offense changed, and it just didn't work. This year, it's really been the injury bug. I mean, last week going into the Southern Miss game, there were 33 guys on the availability report. this week on the Monday press conference, Bryam Vincent said the number is probably around 22, maybe back up to 30 again. And it's not just kind of bumps and bruises or, our starting, defensive end is out. We've lost both kickers, both quarterbacks, running backs, receivers.
Receiver was the one that I'd been paying attention to. Trujillo was dinged up. Jake Godfrey's hurt now. Tyler Griffin was hurt earlier in the year. Like, you can't keep the pass catchers healthy.
Yeah, and you're like, oh, well, you're a running team. Yeah, but when people kind of realized also last year that we were going to run, you started looking at 9 men in the box, and they were going to force you to throw the ball. And last year, we were not very good at throwing the ball. No. We've gotten better this year with Aiden Armenta really kind of taking that leap forward in his sophomore season. But we're still not really a passing team. So having solid hands like Nick Trujillo, Jonathan Bibbs out there really make the difference. Jake Godfrey is another one. But when they're out, it really limits the game. I'm kind of surprised that we haven't seen more involvement with the tight ends to kind of hit that 5-6 yard little curl, set up and do it again, or hand off and get that running play to move the sticks.
Yeah, one of the guys going into the year I had wondered how we would do was Julian Nixon. Had been at Tennessee, came from a JUCO. He seemed like a guy that was a good fit and a dual tight, both blocking and receiving type guy that would fit well in what Vincent is trying to do.
Yeah, and as much as he is kind of that maybe too big to be a fullback, not big enough to be a tight end, too big to be a receiver, too big to be a running back. He actually had a rushing touchdown, though, last week against Southern Miss, so good to see the ball finally getting in his hands there. But, this team has so much talent. They just can't put it together because as soon as they're all healthy, some guy goes down, and then we're having to shuffle the lines around or shuffle the offense, the defense around to try to just make it work. And I feel like that's kind of where we are right now.
Yeah. Kind of recapping last, like you talked about, I like the darts analogy you had, being a Marshall guy, fortunate enough to, win the conference last year. Our road game, there was one of the toughest regular season games we had. 5-point win. I mean, that game was a battle, 23 to, I think it was 28-23 or 28-24, something like that. But that was a tough one. And you guys had a lot of tough ones down the stretch. I mean, that Arkansas State one, I remember watching that. That was a tough one too. But
great to finally get that monkey off the back this year, though, by the way.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, I can imagine it was. Was Arkansas State your guys' first conference game this year?
Yes, that's what kicked it all off. Was that that win at home, first time in 15 years where we were able to actually beat the Red Wolves. Surprisingly, though, I think 6 out of that 15-year stretch were one possession or less. And so it had always been a good, close game. There were some blowouts in there, but for the most part, it had always been a good, close game. So the fact that you were finally able to kind of right the ship and get that win, you really thought that this was going to be the season that we were hoping for, where we were going to be atop the Sun Belt West, compete for at least the divisional title, and then see what happens in the championship game. But then, like I said, just the injuries have really derailed everything going on.
Yeah, I think that's a good way to put it. And going in, the West seemed pretty wide open. A lot of people were saying the Cajuns will have a shot again in preseason. I agreed with that and thought they might. Texas State looked good, and those two teams that a lot of people thought would be the contenders, they're 1-3 and 0-3 in the conference between the two of them. So very much struggling there. Southern Miss, I think everybody expected they would be better. You couldn't be any worse than they were last year. They were absolutely atrocious. But they've outpaced even, what I thought they would do with Huffler, which was, I'll be the first to say as a Marshall guy, there's been a lot of, stuff thrown back and forth with the fan bases. Our former AD handled that terribly, and I blamed him more than anybody for the way that went down. But it's tough whenever you lose a coach, you just won the conference. that's tough for you. But it's worked out well for Southern Miss so far. And the team that's really surprised me, I didn't think Troy would be nearly as good this year. They've come out of the gates and played well.
I thought Troy was going to be better because last year when ULM squeaked out that win there at their place, whatever it was, it kind of clicked. And you saw Troy start surging, but it was a little too late last year. I thought that this year they were going to be good. Not necessarily contenders for the West, but they were going to be good. They would be a 6-7 win team. But then when Goose went down, Goose Crowder, their starting quarterback, I was like, nope, they're done for. And Tucker Gilcrease has really kind of stepped up and really just kept it going. And you know, we saw it firsthand when they were at ULM, able to get that win, the crazy overtime win there against Texas State.
Yeah,
I think that they're lucky, and that's not to downplay it, because I definitely think in all the years that I've been doing this and watching Sunbelt football, luck is an intangible skill that a team has to have to really succeed.
And the flip side of like a team you just mentioned, we're seeing the inverse of that with Texas State now. You lose a 1-point game at Arkansas State. You lose in overtime to Troy. You come to Marshall and lose in double overtime. When the bounces like that don't go your way, it's not going to be a very good season usually. And that's we're seeing the bad side of that for them right now.
And typically that's a maroon and gold team that faces that.
Yeah. No, I hear you there. But, you know, focusing on ULM, you know, for this year, going, you know, in the summer, off season, what were your expectations coming into this season?
I don't know. And I say that because all the talk coming into the season is, what are we going to do at running back? Because we lost Ahmad Hardy, the freshman All-American who went to Missouri. There was no real talk about, well, Billy Pullen's coming back at that linebacker position. Vontae Wells. There was no real talk about that. You might hear some, oh, yeah, we have these guys coming back, but what are we going to do at the running? That's all you heard about. And I think that Braylon McReynolds, the transfer from South Alabama, showed that really we had nothing to worry about. We should have worried about everything else. And so I think that coming into the season, though, that was the big talking point was, what are we going to do at running back?
Yeah, and in hindsight, him and Zach Palmer-Smith have both been solid players. Like they're running the ball right. Yeah.
And no one really said anything about Dorian Lewis, who has been just as good. And we still haven't really seen Tyrell Reed. Deshaun Ford's had some touches, but maybe not as many as maybe was expected out of him. But at the same time, even though he was the 4-star, the high school All-American coming in, you got to remember this is still an 18-year-old kid. He's not physically or mentally developed yet to be that every down back at the D1 level.
Certainly not. No, that's a good point. I think hampering those expectations is something necessary for everybody. And considering, you guys are such a run-heavy team, and, Vincent's made that his MO, what was the O-line like coming into this year? I can't say I'm as familiar with how many of those guys up front you returned.
Just about everybody. Okay. I mean, you had a couple that transferred out. One was drafted to go into the CFL. One went to Central Florida. But for the most part, your every down linemen were back. Headlined by Elijah Fisher, who moved from the guard inside to the center position. Okay. Crazy for somebody that coming out of high school was a defensive end, was not even an offensive lineman, and has moved around to be a first-team all-conference player and really the vocal leader of this team, as well as being literally the anchor on the offensive line at the center position.
Good. Yeah, I'll be the first. I had no idea he was a former D lineman. Like, just looking at his size, I wouldn't have thought that. Yeah. So that's interesting. Yeah. Now, in this season, we had started off 3-1, then that Northwestern game, which obviously you're tough to beat any Big Ten team, when you're in the Sun Belt, but conference games. We had the Arkansas State win and then dropped the last three. Focusing on the Sun Belt games, what's went right? What has went wrong in the last three that they've dropped?
The biggest thing, like we talked about, really having to change the offense. We didn't have a kicker until this past week because both the starter, Max Larson, who's been out for the season, and then his backup, Luke Stagg, we didn't have a kicker to do actual place kicking. So anytime you were inside that 30, typically you're like, okay, we're going to get that, 60-40 chance of putting 3 on the board. ULM wasn't there. We weren't able to consistently have that chance to kick the field goal. So we were having to go for it unconventionally. That really hurts when even if you miss the field goal, right? That's still kind of the victory that you've moved the ball down inside a reasonable range and been able to. But when you're constantly having to go for it on fourth and just turnover on down, it changes the game. And I think it starts wearing on you mentally as well. You look at last week, though, against Southern Miss, 3 straight turnovers. It was 49-21 was the final score, 3 straight turnovers that all resulted in touchdowns. You take that out, it's a 1-possession game, but that's still a night and day difference. And again,
and the game I watched a lot of that Troy game the week before. You look at the stats, ULM outrushed them, outgained them. They were better statistically in most things, except they had 4 turnovers and Troy didn't have any.
And one of those turnovers was a pick six. Yeah.
Yep.
And so it's all just the little things. And I think Coach Vincent's even said several times, it's all about execution. It's also that costly penalty where you have that holding call after you had just moved the ball, say 18 yards down the field. And in Coastal, we had 6 instances where it was 3rd and 20, 3rd and 30.
Ooh.
Just as we always say, show me that on the play card where that play is that you call.
Exactly. Yeah, there's not a 3rd and 20 play call there. That's a good point. Now, ODU coming up at home this weekend. Now, I was, heard we're fortunate enough to get a win against them a couple weeks ago. One of the best games we played all year. ODU scored a couple touchdowns late, but really that game was a blowout. We had some big special teams plays, and it's by far the best our defense has played all year, which isn't saying much. Outside of that game, hasn't been too fantastic. But what are you looking for in this, ULM ODU game?
I see this very much like the Arkansas State game, where the focus was on how do you contain Corey Rucker at the receiver position and Jalen Rayner, who was going to target Rucker over and over again. And if he wasn't there, he was going to run the ball. I think the difference is that Colton Joseph is going to look for whatever the best offensive play is and make that happen. And half the time it's him running, half the time it's him lobbing up a pass that is usually to a wide open receiver because they have some serious speed. So I think that really containing Colton Joseph is what you have to do to have a chance to win the game. I think offensively, we've got to get back to the basics. We've got to be able to run the football. We got to not shoot ourselves in the foot and give ourselves the chance to really be able to put points on the board, even if we're missing the field goal, right? As long as it's a good attempt and it's been a good drive, I think that's great. And we saw that again. I know I'm harping on last week against Southern Miss, but that opening drive, it was like a 12-play, 75-yard drive, 7.5 minutes. Perfect. That's exactly what you want to see out of this ULM offense, where they're running the ball consistently, couple dink and dunk passes just to keep them honest, but for the most part, run the ball, and find your way to the end zone.
And ODU's run D hasn't been great. When they came here and played Marshall a couple weeks ago, we had a lot of success running, both QB and running backs running the ball, broke off some long ones, got a lot of first downs. And even though ODU scored some touchdowns late, we were able to really grind the clock out at the end and put the game out of reach. And if you guys don't turn the ball over, I think you will have success on the ground.
Yeah, and not to take anything away from Marshall, I think Old Dominion didn't care about that Marshall game. They wanted the next week against JMU because they knew that that was going to be the bigger win and put them in better position to win the East. It didn't work out for them by any stretch, but I think that was their focus.
Yeah, I think that's a fair way to put it. With all the new faces and basically the whole squad and coaches being new at Marshall, that MO, what was the case early on with both ODU, maybe Texas State, where it's not that you underestimate the opponent, but you just think there's so much change there that they're not ready to handle us. That you're probably right about that. I think that's a fair take. We talked a bit about Sun Belt. Your division, the West. South Alabama, you guys have the week after, or you have a bye after ODU, right? Then South Alabama. And that's a squad that they're really struggling. They have the one conference win, 2-6 overall, but I don't see them winning many more games. Major Applewhite may not keep his job after this year. I don't know how that's going to end for him. What are your take on South Alabama this year? Obviously losing Gio Lopez and their O coordinator to Wake Forest. Robazell was tough for them, and they really haven't managed since then. Losing Fluff Bothwell to Mississippi State, been tough.
Yeah, and that's the day and age we live in with this portal where you're able to transfer last minute because Gio was coming back, and then all of a sudden he's off with Bill Belichick. And I think that he has some buyer's remorse of leaving South Alabama to go up there because it's not all sunshine and butterflies, so to say, in the powder blue.
Yeah. And I'll be honest, I made the comment when he did that, if you're him and you're gonna leave, why don't you just leave with your O coordinator in January and go to Wake Forest? Like, to me, the whole process of it seemed kind of odd. Yeah.
So as far as South Alabama, I think that they were dealt a bad hand, much like we all are, right? I think that the big difference was it was so late in the game for them that they weren't able to go out and really recruit and try to pull in that replacement or even that solid backup to kind of give you that safety net. I feel like, right now it's Davenport or bust, and the run game is really struggling, so they're having to air it out. And the offense just isn't really an air raid type of offense that can do that.
It's not, no. And I don't want to, throw shade at, the two of them, but their one win was probably against the other worst team in the conference too, in Georgia State, who seems like they're all over the place and can't find a QB, can't do anything through the pass game, can't stop anybody on defense. Been a rough go of it for, Del McGee, in his 2 years there. They can't seem to. And that's a place where you'd think you couldn't, in the portal world we're living in, you could capitalize on those Atlanta guys that are transferring down. Maybe they weren't playing at a P4 school, or they were playing and doing well at an FCS school. You'd think you could get that, homecoming for more guys, but they just seem so disjointed, like they don't have an identity. I don't know what the answer is for Georgia State right now.
Yeah, it's a weird situation because there's not much of a campus to enjoy.
No.
The stadium is not, it's near campus, but it's not on campus. It's kind of a weird situation, but yeah, I agree that I don't know why they're not able to get more and better talent of it sounds bad of the leftovers of Georgia, but Georgia's going to get theirs, right? And then Georgia Tech's probably going to get theirs. Clemson's going to dip in there. But I don't understand why they're not able to kind of get that next level of recruit, because they have some pretty nice facilities. They have a pretty hopping campus that is there. They have basketball. They have decent baseball. It's not just a rural junk heap. I mean, it's a pretty good program. I don't get why they're not able to kind of move the needle and push things forward.
And the way it's looking this year with CUSA, you might be getting passed up by Kennesaw State, who's only 30 miles away for some of those guys. I mean, they're having a resurgence under Jerry Mack and looking very solid out in Kennesaw. So if you're losing guys to them, that's when you really got to worry if you're Georgia State. I don't know if that's happening yet, but based on how this year's going, it might.
As long as we don't start talking about, oh, we shouldn't have added Louisiana Tech from CUSA, we should have added Kennesaw. No.
Yeah, I'm 100% okay with adding La Tech, by the way. My thought, and a lot of people said it should have been WKU. I don't know that they wanted to make that move. To me, I think they're happy with where they're at. But if we were going to add a team, for me, it was La Tech or Jacksonville State would have been the two that made the most sense.
The biggest thing that I have an issue with is having 3 teams in Louisiana, because being from Louisiana, we all know that the politics there's no telling what the legislation is going to do, especially, I mean, they're about to spend $20-50 million, whatever, for a head coach at LSU, and then whatever it costs to actually replace that. There's no telling when they're just going to say, you know what, we have too many schools, we're cutting it, and the Sun Belt is then down to only one member institution in the state. Do I think that's going to happen? No, but that's just the way my crazy mind thinks and weird things that have happened in Louisiana.
I think that's a fair take. Yeah. The other one, I will say most of the Marshall people here and a lot of the JMU, ODU people in Virginia, they were very keen on ECU as a possibility. I wasn't as high on that one, but in some ways it would have made sense, but I'm glad we didn't go that direction.
I would sell the conference soul to get East Carolina in. I think that they would be a fantastic addition, but it doesn't keep the division structure there, or you have to kind of move somebody over. Like Georgia State is now in the West, but then what does that do for their rivalry with Georgia Southern and everything else? So as much as I would love to have them, I mean, I think we've talked about it on Fun Belt, on Believe. A bad ECU team is still supported way better than a winning insert school team. And that's across the board at all their sports. Yeah. So having them does nothing but help elevate the conference and really generate a lot more excitement.
And I think what you just said there summed up, the conversations I had around here, because, a lot of the Marshall people weren't keen on La Tech, weren't keen on Jacksonville State, but very much wanted to keep the divisions. Well, you can't have it both ways. If you want the division to sit, and they said, well, if we don't add one, we could still keep the divisions. No, you can't have an odd number and do that. You needed to add a team to the West. There weren't a lot of great options. We probably added the best one
out of the options. Yeah. And that kind of came up at Sunbelt Media Days where they talked about, okay, great. We don't want to add anybody. We'll stay at 13. Fantastic. But the problem with that is the scheduling. Some team would have had to play 10 straight weeks of conference play.
Oh boy.
It just doesn't logistically work.
You're getting a bye in week 2 and then your next bye's in week 13. That's tough.
Yeah. And so, once that was pointed out by Commissioner Keith Gill, I was like, okay, we'll suck it up and add Louisiana Tech. I'm not a fan of them. I think that they do fit. I like the fact that everybody hates them, that I think that adds even more intensity and rivalries throughout the league. So
I think I'm the only person that doesn't hate them, and maybe it's because I'm a Sunbelt convert of barely 2 years. So
yeah. So, but I think that the hate is good, because everybody's going to tune in. It's almost like the old Howard Stern saying, right? Yeah. People listen to him because they love him. People listen to him because they hate him. They listen to him because they want to see why they should like him or hate him even more. Same thing.
The other interesting one that, the team that popped up around that time that it seemed like everybody else also hated was Liberty, who got thrown about in that conversation a little bit.
Yeah, and it doesn't fit. I mean, why would you want to add them? We didn't add them when they were trying to offer millions of dollars to member
Yes.
institutions last time around. So why would we add them, quote unquote, for free now? When if we look at the product, they're not really adding the value that they were in football. They're not adding it for baseball. They're okay in men's basketball, but not on the level of Louisiana Tech. No. And with us wanting to improve our net ratings for men's and women's basketball, we got to add the right programs to improve the net for men's and women's basketball.
Absolutely. So realistically, in this conversation, obviously La Tech got added. We had mentioned, maybe WKU. I'd heard some people throw out Middle Tennessee. Jacksonville's one that I thought was all right. East Carolina. Are there any other viable teams that I missed, or did we talk about all of them basically? Like it's a fairly short list of teams that would have been possibilities here.
Yeah, the only other one that I think would be great, and it's kind of an insult also to Texas State on their way out, bringing North Texas back. But they got to have baseball because A, they don't have it at all to be good, bad, or indifferent. B, this is a baseball league. And so if you don't have good baseball, you're definitely not bringing that value to the table. That would be a tough sell to do. But yeah, for the most part, there's not really that team where we're just like, all right, we got to have them outside of East Carolina. I think there's just not that team that we have to have.
One of the teams I wanted to ask you about, because it surprised me that nobody brought them up. Why was UAB not considered, or were they not interested?
I don't think that they fit the profile because traditionally they're not very good in football. So we're not really adding value there. They're really good at men's basketball. They're not good at women's basketball. They're not really good at baseball. I don't even know if they have softball. And so when you start looking at it, it just starts adding up that they don't fit the Sun Belt Conference mold.
I know the one, and this would have been geographically not a divisional fit at all, but when Northern Illinois went to the Mountain West, adding Ohio was one that some people said, adding Ohio, because they're 75 miles from us. They're a football power relative to the MAC. But that's about it. Great college town, place is awesome. But that's about all they have, too. Like it does nothing for the teams in the West by adding them, really.
Yeah, and if that's the case, then, for the Sun Belt to be formed, right, we had to kind of take the plunge and have our 8 members that were willing to step out on the line and say, okay, we'll do it. We'll play football in this coast-to-coast conference. If we're going to add somebody just to add somebody, we might as well give the tip of the cap to one of the OGs there in Idaho and bring them back so that at least we get our pilgrimage to the Kibbe Dome, once every 2 years or 3 years, whatever it is.
I like it. Yeah, that place is something else. Yeah, but no,
absolutely love that place.
Yeah. Oh, it's sweet. Yeah, I'm glad we talked. The conference expansion is a fun thing, though. I'm glad that we talked about that a bit. In talking about the Sun Belt, one of the things I always ask, the viewer or my guest, what right now, if you're picking, what are the 2 teams you think will play for the conference title?
I think it's Southern Miss. Well, I don't want to say Southern Miss because they still got to play Troy. So I think the winner of that game, Southern Miss, Troy, and James Madison. I mean, James Madison is clicking on all cylinders. It's crazy to me that 3 years in and they have not even sniffed the conference championship game. Now, I know everyone wants to say that first year they weren't eligible for it. You know what? That's what you signed up for when you signed on the dotted line to join, that you weren't going to be bowl eligible, that you weren't eligible for the conference title. You know as well as I do that they were going to run the tables and just be dominant.
Yeah, it's a terrible rule, but it's something you know. Don't say anybody pulled the wool over your eyes there. You knew what you were getting into, whether it's bad or not.
Exactly.
And that went for Sam Houston, who was very good the year they jumped up to.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Or wait, was it Jacksonville or Sam Houston? Which one was good when they jumped up? I might be getting them confused. Okay.
Jacksonville won their bowl game the first year they were eligible because they beat Louisiana Lafayette in the New Orleans Bowl.
That's who I was thinking of. Yes. Yeah, good call. Oh, yeah, when they still had Rich Rod. Yeah. Oh, he was your old core. I forgot about that. Yeah. Wasn't by the way, I remember watching when his boy was playing QB and got blasted in that one game. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, that was a rough one. I totally blanked on it that he had a cup of coffee at ULM. Yeah.
Yeah, he had 1 year there, Bowden's first year.
Yep. I forgot it was his first year. I thought he had been there a little longer before he was with Rich Rod.
One and done. Yeah.
Which, tough to blame him for, getting a head job somewhere else. But it's tough like for your predictions there, probably has to be the winner of Troy Southern Miss. And then, I think JMU is certainly the odds-on favorite. If for some reason Marshall can knock them off in 2 weeks when they come here, we'd probably pip them. But they have another win, and it's going to be a really tough game. So I said JMU preseason, and I'm going to stick with that one. So let's talk about some coaching stuff. So I'd mentioned UAB a few minutes ago. They have fired Trent Dilfer, which I think everybody knew was going to happen. Not many people thought that was a good hire from the beginning, I feel like. But before that, after Bill Clark left a couple years ago, Bryam Vincent was the interim at UAB and did okay. I was kind of surprised they didn't make him the full-time guy when they had the chance, but they didn't. And he went to New Mexico as O-coordinator. Now, obviously, with you guys, do you think there's a chance UAB comes back and offers him the job? I think they would be foolish not to at least talk to him. You know way more than me about this. What do you think that's a possibility?
I've been around long enough to never say never. Okay. But I think the bigger thing that would keep him out of going back to Birmingham is Ingram, the athletic director, is still there. The guy that did not pull the trigger, and the president is still the same.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. So the one I would be more curious about is if you mentioned Applewhite not returning at South Alabama. That's Bryam Vincent's backyard and where he was a coordinator and a position coach there before. If I'm him, that's kind of the homecoming grand slam hire. Couldn't be happier to do that.
I never thought, I knew he had coached there before, but that I hadn't thought about him taking that one. And I think in my mind, I viewed it as too much of a lateral move, but he probably would get a pay raise to go there. And the other thing that I wanted to ask you about in relation to him potentially moving, he's the interim athletic director now. Yeah. Do you think that could keep him there? Will there be a potential that he gets the job long term? Do you think that is going to play into this factor at all?
Maybe. Okay. So I think he's kind of the outward facing athletic director. There's a associate deputy AD, Rob Bernardi, longtime guy at Tulane at Nichols. That's really kind of doing the day in, day out grind work of being the athletic director.
You probably have to during the football season. He can't do both.
Yeah. Right. With that said, if there's something that really needs a decision, they go to Vincent. I feel like at a Southern school, the football coach is kind of on par with the AD anyway. Yeah. So I think as long as he still kind of has that trump card or equal vote or whatever you want to call it, I think that having an athletic director that can take some off his plate but know that he still has that influence would be enough to satisfy it. Now, if you get the guy that comes in and he wants to bring in his own coaches, and that's a completely different conversation.
It is. Yeah.
But I just don't think that it's sustainable to keep being AD, because we've only had Bryam Vincent AD for the football season. We haven't even seen what he's going to do when the golf team has something going on in the spring, or for basketball or baseball or, spring football. He's back at it again and unable to really commit to these other sports. That's
what I was going to say. Like, what about when you have baseball, softball, track meet, but he has spring football? Like, how was that going to be juggled? Something will have to give. And either way, you're going to disappoint people, because if you're not at those sports, it's, well, he's just the coach and he doesn't care about the other sports. But if he's missing football and then things start to go bad next fall, he was neglecting the team because he was doing too much. Like, it's a fine line to walk there.
Yeah, and we're seeing some of that already, where, we talked about the string of injuries really doesn't have anything to do with the coaching, the game planning. No. But it's definitely a fan base going, well, maybe he has too much on his plate that he's OC and head coach and athletic director. I'm like, I'll give you the OC and head coach part, but AD, that's not tying into a string of injuries or anything else.
No, not at all. That's I think a very nice way to put it. In the Sun Belt, looking at all the coaches, talk about, a lot of these things on my episodes, with the various conferences. So far, who's been the most surprising coach for you this year? In a positive, good surprise.
A good surprise, I would say, honestly, I got to say Huff at Southern Miss. I mean, I know that he brought a large chunk of his roster there to Southern Miss, but I don't think it was as plug and play ready as most people wanted it to be. And I think I kind of even fell into that boat as well.
I did too. I think it ended up being 19 guys, or 19%. It was either 19 guys or 19% of the roster, but it was something around that 19 to 20 number of guys. Yeah.
But I think being able to mesh the new and the old was huge, and that he's actually able to maybe not publicly say it, but still kind of keep that, hey, we did it last year, we can do it this year. You just got to buy into the system and keep going. Yeah. I think that's huge, that he's able to kind of show that it's more than just the players. It's to a degree him and his staff.
I think that's well said. I mean, 4 years here, he made a bowl game every year. That's not easy to do. And then, won the conference his last year, and then went to a team that was 1-11 and they're already bowl eligible. So, and I had said, even with, everybody knew they'd get better, but I also had hampered expectations and said, if they make a bowl game in year one, that's a massive success. If you win 5 games more than the previous year, that's awesome. They've already done that and some. So another guy, 2 guys, I'll eat crow a little bit on Jared Parker. I didn't really care for the hire when it was made. And like I said before, I didn't think Troy would be great this year. My hat goes off to Jared Parker. He's doing a heck of a job so far this year. Very pleased with him. And then I'll also say my little homer pick, Tony Gibson's done a good job. Marshall started off rough. They've turned it around the last few weeks and are playing good football right now. And for all the changes here, everything being new, Gibson's doing a pretty good job.
Yeah, I really like talking to Gibson down at Sunbelt Media Days over the summer.
Awesome. I didn't know you did that. That's great. Yeah.
Yeah. And man, the guy I love, there's always that one coach that really I gravitate to. I love some Ricky Ronnie at Old Dominion, but I love some D-Lo at App State. That guy is just a dude that is, and you're like, yeah, no shit, I know this. He's a football coach. He is just a football coach that is just a guy that wants to hang out and win and BS with everybody.
So if I wanted to, I could take off the off-season after dark hat and the Marshall hat, and I could put on my Gamecock hat and talk about D-Lo if you want to do more. So that's the alma mater. So
yeah.
And boy, have they missed him this year. The Mike Shula experience, as many of us expected, is not going well on offense. So, and not that App State is doing great this year, but at 4-4, 1-3 in the conference, I think long term they're going to be okay with him.
Yeah, he's plugged the holes in the boat and has really righted the ship, and good for him.
Yeah, and they're another one, with Cole Swan, that their QBs, they've been injured there too, so that's tough for anybody. Now, conversely, which coach would you say has been the most disappointing for you? I'll say for me, I talked about all the close games they had before, but it's tough not to say Kinney at this point. I don't care how close the games have been. 0-3 in the conference. That's not what you signed up for. They expected to be a division contender.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think that's been the biggest disappointment. I figured that they would really contend this year for the West title, kind of going out, even if it was giving everybody the year number one to capture that last piece of hardware. But they're just falling flat. And I think another one that maybe I've been a little disappointed in, Mike Desimo of Louisiana Lafayette. I really thought that this was going to be their year. I thought that last year, they were a 10-win team. Yes, they did not have the same program together when they went to the bowl game and kind of got blown out there. But he even addressed it. He's like, the locker room's full of guys that keep saying yes. And unfortunately, we're impacted more by the guys that say no. But I just feel like this year that team, with so many pieces coming back, just hasn't lived up to the hype this year. Now, they can still right the ship, still hit 6 wins, go to a bowl game, and we're all happy. But I just feel like they should be a lot further along than where they are.
Yeah, Winfield has shown flashes. Certainly, Walker Howard getting hurt early on wasn't good for that team. But when I had one of the UL guys on in the summer, for me, they were my pick to win the West, and that it looks like they're a ways away from that happening. They'll really have to turn it around to get that to happen. 2 coaching questions I always ask my guests. The first one is a little more predictable. Who's on the hottest seat in the conference right now?
Clay Helton, Georgia Southern, which ironically has one of the larger buyouts in the conference. So you might be kind of stuck with him until you can raise the money to get rid of him. But there is not a many Georgia Southern fan that want to keep him around on the shores of Eagle Creek much longer.
That's a good one. Yeah, I might lean Applewhite, but it's tough to argue with Helton. They're another one who their expectations are a little higher, and they want to be in that hunt for the division most years. And they're just not playing any defense or doing much right. So I think that's a good one. The other question I always ask, what coach in the Sun Belt do you think is one who, with a good season or two, doesn't have to be this year, next year, anytime in the near future, who do you think could get a significantly better job at a P4 school?
He'll be out of the conference by the time it happens, but I think G.J. Kinney is that guy that could take the leap to go into the P4. Out of everyone else,
I think Huff will do at some point.
Yeah, maybe. I don't know if I don't think he's shown enough of being the head coach at a G6 to qualify him for a P4 yet. I think he's still coordinator level at the P4.
Okay. And I think winning the conference at Marshall, whether it's this year or next 2-3, if he wins the conference again with a different school, that might put me over the edge on him. I also think
no doubt.
His background of he was a Saban assistant, and also a job I think that could be open in the next couple of years in his home state. He could be a Maryland guy. That's not a great job, but it is a Big Ten job. I think he's a Maryland guy if they're making a hire.
Yeah, I mean, when you start looking at that, and it blows my mind when you talk about a ACC Cal team. So my mind might not necessarily still be wrapped around the P4, so to say.
No, I get that totally. Yeah. But that, Kenny, I think when we had this conversation in the summer, Kenny was my guess, but it doesn't happen this year. After how disappointing they've been, he'll need to have a couple good years out west, metaphorically with them, I think, for it to happen. Like in his case this year, if they would have had a good year, potentially won the conference or been in consideration for the conference title this year, he could have been an Oklahoma State candidate. Dave Aranda might get fired at Baylor. He could have been a potential guy for that job. Like there are those Texas adjacent jobs.
The Arkansas job, yeah,
exactly. So that'll be interesting. But now we'll move out of the Sun Belt, talk about some of the other coaching jobs available. Yeah, obviously LSU is, the hot one in your part of the world and the world of college football, not just Louisiana, Texas that came up, but that's a massive one. Florida, Penn State, you'd mentioned Arkansas, Oklahoma State, Virginia Tech. We got some decent jobs open. What do you say the three big ones? LSU, Florida, Penn State. Do you have any predictions what might happen at this time?
I'd be curious to see if Brian Kelly doesn't make it at least to a finalist of Penn State. Even though he did the horrible, South Louisiana accent when he was introduced to LSU, he is a Northern guy, Midwest guy that Penn State might be a good fit. I'm kind of curious of Lane Kiffin if he doesn't wind up at least talking to Florida and LSU, which is crazy to me that you're seeing all this poaching of your coach within the same conference time and time again. But it's a weird day, weird time. That's for sure.
And with the Kiffin one, it's interesting because he'd be foolish not to talk to them if we're talking about getting a raise. And one of the guys I do shows with is Locked On Ole Miss, and I think he expects they will certainly offer him a big raise to stay. And why wouldn't you? You pretty much have to. But if there was ever a time for him to go, it would be for one of these jobs, I think. If he doesn't leave now, I would maybe start asking, does he stay there as long as he wants to?
I just can't. I can't picture Kiffin in purple and gold. I can't do it. Period.
If they don't hire Kiffin, who do you think would be the guy?
I don't think Frank Wilson, the interim, is a guy that'll be in the conversation.
No, and he was lousy when he was a head coach before.
Yeah. I don't know what they really want. I know they want somebody that has the Southern culture. Maybe it's Summerall at Tulane.
Yeah, I wrote an article about it for Mike Carroll Sports a couple days ago, and Summerall was on the list. Eli Drinkwitz was on the list. Brent Key is a guy I've heard that some people are interested in at Georgia Tech. And then the last one I put on, I don't know how viable this guy would be, but would Joe Brady have any interest in, leaving the NFL? Coordinator with the Bills, obviously was their O coordinator in 2019 for the unbelievable season they had. But I feel like whether it's Penn State, Florida, LSU, I don't know if it would be his first choice, but I feel like Eli Drinkwitz probably gets one of them. And I think you would take any of them if you're him. He's done tremendous at Mizzou. I think it will be tough for them to hold on to Drinkwitz.
And again, it's all interconference transfers.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah, sure is. And that the LSU opening probably happened at the worst possible time for Florida, because there's so much overlap with the coaching candidates that it now, makes it more difficult for you to hire your, first candidates. So I'll be curious what happens there.
Maybe it's my ULM fan in me coming out. I'm just dumbfounded that you're firing a coach where you're consistently having 7-8 wins. And that's not good enough.
Yeah. I mean, I get the LSU people didn't like, the Brian Kelly culture fit. But to me, that also shows that they weren't really on board with him from day one, and he maybe never was going to fit. And that's as much due to them as it is to him.
Yeah, no doubt.
Yeah. And with Penn State, that was the one that probably surprised me the most out of the three of them. Like 6 games ago, that guy was playing in a national semifinal. Then you fire him. Sure, this year was disappointing, but if you're firing a guy that successful and that good, to me, you have to know you are hiring a better replacement. I don't think you can know that because of how good he was. Like it's tough to do.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I don't know. Right now, if I had to make a prediction for the Penn State job, I would have trouble doing it. To me, I think it would be easier to guess with Florida and LSU. Who Penn State ends up with, to me, that's a wide open one at this point. So
Jimbo Fisher, your new Florida Gator head coach.
Oh God, I actually think he's a pretty good coach. He'll end up somewhere, but that would be fantastic. My Texas A&M guys that we do the group show with, they might not feel the same way, but I will tell them that that was your recommendation. They'll like that one.
Yeah, I mean, you stole one from the Knowles, right?
Yep. I think it's a great move. But yeah, so we'll move to our, we're approaching our hour here. Right now, who do you think will be the G5 team that makes the playoffs? G6, whatever you want to, I've had different people call it different things.
Yeah,
it's tough. Like we're
not
going to get that undefeated one.
I think this is one of the few years where I just say, okay, great, but I don't think that there's that team out there that can compete. I feel like it's that year that Central Michigan maybe that made the Cotton Bowl and just got drummed out of the stadium.
Western. It was PJ Fleck.
Western.
Yeah.
Yeah.
He went to Minnesota after that. I think it was Florida State beat Northern Illinois, I think, in one of those. But yeah, Western was the one that you're thinking of.
I feel like that's what it'll be this year. Like it's so top heavy in that playoff.
It is.
Maybe Memphis. I mean, Houston's ranked higher than them, but I feel like Memphis has the better street cred and the better credentials overall.
Well, Houston's Big 12 now.
Oh yeah. See, I told you I can't get my head around the whole conference.
Houston, Cincinnati, two of the best teams in the Big 12 now. Yeah. Or not. Yeah. But that's
and we're what, 15 years from them being Conference USA?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah. For me, JMU might have an outside shot if they can run the table, but to me, it's looking. If Tulane, Memphis, Navy, if one of those three can finish the season with just one loss and win the conference, it's probably going to be that American team, would be my guess right now.
Which is crazy that the Americans still considered a G6.
Yeah, they've had about as much movement as anybody. We'll see what happens with them, but yeah, I don't know. In terms of title-wise, to me, it's until somebody beats the Buckeyes, I'd probably pick Ohio State until I see someone take them down. They seem to be the most complete team to me. There aren't many weaknesses on that squad. They're doing about everything adequately or better. So
I like Bama, and maybe that's just because I want them to win a national title so that we're on all of their, commemorative schedules when they put the beat down on us in week 2. But no, I think that Bama team, that opening week loss opened their eyes, and we're now seeing the Bama of old, and they're making up ground. But I feel like that's the team to beat right now in college football.
The other two that I'm curious about, at their best, I'm curious to see how Texas A&M can compete with those teams because they're pretty good, I think. And nobody's beat Indiana yet. Last year, they obviously exceeded all of our expectations, then got beat by Notre Dame in their first playoff game. You wonder, with some experience going back there again, if Indiana will be able to make a run at the playoffs. I wonder about that.
It's Kirk Signetti. He wins. Google him.
Yeah. The other team, we left Notre Dame for dead and buried after 2 weeks. They're playing really good football right now. They're running the ball, playing good D. I don't know if they can win 4 games in a row against those elite teams, but Notre Dame could knock off anybody on their given day.
I refuse to accept the Irish.
Okay. To me, I'm kind of that way right now with Oregon. I have nothing against them. I just don't know that I see them as an elite team yet from what I've seen this year. So I don't know how I feel about the Ducks. Lanning's a heck of a coach, and Dante Moore's good. But I have reservations about the Ducks so far. So Thibs, want to thank you for being here. We have reached the conclusion of our show, but fantastic episode. Love talking about ULM, Sunbelt, all of our coaching stuff. Great to talk to someone else who's interested in the conference like I am. So everybody, you can find him, Warhawk Report, and tell everybody where else they can find you. Give them one more reminder of that.
Yeah, we're on the X, Warhawk_report, warhawkreport.com, where you'll see all of our content, and you can find our podcast on Funbelt Podcast, and that also has Believe in the Warhawks on Spotify, Apple, YouTube. The YouTube channel is Funbelt Podcast, so check us out there, and love to hear from you. We have open DMs, so we get some wild ones. Maybe one day we'll have a full show just of reading DMs.
Oh, fantastic. I would love to hear that. Yeah. Hopefully it is not Marshall fans and Southern Miss fans arguing with each other, because that's been the worst part of social media in the last year for me. So
thick skin.
Well, it's not, it's just both sides are so ridiculous in what they say. Like they're not attacking me. It's seeing how delusional both of these people are and one-sided. But again, thank you for being here. It was a fantastic episode, and everybody, you know where you can follow them now. Warhawk Report will be tagged in this. Thank you for being here. Have a great week.
Thanks.